Dear colleagues, we continue our working day, and the topic of the next press briefing, the Chechen case of Mykola, Karpiuk and Stanislav Klych. The investigative committee refuses to recognize Karpiuk and Klykh have been tortured. Our speakers are Tomak, Center for Civil Liberties, Nadiya Volkova, legal expert at Ukrainian Helsinki Human Rights Union, Tamara, mother of Stanislav Klych, and Ilya Novikov, lawyer of Karpiuk and Mykola Klych. And now I offer the floor to Nadiya Volkova. Dear colleagues, good afternoon. We are very thankful to you that you do not lose interest in the cases of Kremlin prisoners. I represent the initiators of Let My People Go campaign, initiators who try to release the prisoners of Kremlin who were kidnapped in Crimea. We have 21 persons on our list. 13 are in the Russian Federation and 8 in the occupied Crimea, and we have issued the report about 28 cases who are detained or were persecuted. This is a trend and one of the instruments of the hybrid war of the Russian Federation against Ukraine. And talking about these cases on international ground and here in Ukraine, we should talk about the people who are endangered. One of the prisoners who have always, whose life and threat has been in permanent danger, is Mr. Klych, who is alone with Mykola Karpiuk in the pre-trial detention center. His life and health is in danger continuously, and the psychiatric expert assessment of the health condition of Stanislav Klych was postponed, and the court sessions will take place every day, and this is an attempt either to fast investigate the case, or there are some other factors, I don't know, but we will be talking about the facts and documents. As you know, there were testimonies of the detainees and accused and their defense that the torture have been applied to them, and we have documents which prove the torture applied, which make doubtful any verdict of guilty if such a verdict will be brought in. And about the expert assessment, it has been completed. There are findings and results, but the defense do not comment on them. The only thing to talk about that the defense will demand independent psychiatric expert assessment of Stanislav Klych mental health, and we have received some information, some communication 10 minutes ago. It is very important to disclose this information that the MPs of the Czech parliament addressed the Russian Federation counterparts. There are 22 Czech MPs who signed this letter. This letter, of course, has unprecedented importance. It's the expression of their civil positions. We do not see often such letters, such expressions of civilian positions. I would like to quote the letter. We, the undersigned Czech MPs, ask you to release Nadezhda Savchenko, Oleg Sentsov, Kolchenko, Cherny, Karpiuk, Klych, Viktor Shur, Yuri Salashenko, Gennady Afanasyev, Alexander Kostenko, Sergey Milyev, Valentin Vygovsky, and Sergei Litvinov, who are now illegally detained and imprisoned in the territory of Russian Federation due to the tension between the RF and Ukraine. This step would help to normalize the relations between the two countries. We are deeply concerned about the tension between these two countries, and some persons becomes victims of this tension, and the conflict between the countries result in their imprisonment, and we ask you to address this issue and to release Ukrainian citizens. The circumstances of detainment and the court proceedings are controversial, and they damage the image of the Russian Federation and distrust in other countries and spoil relations with the European Union. And we are sure that there are ways to resolve the situation, and now the security in Europe is threatened as well by this situation, and the Russian Federation signed in February the Minsk agreements, and we ask you to adhere to the requirements of this agreement signed on February 22. We are very grateful to those Czech MPs who wrote this letter, and thanks to their pressure, there may be some steps will be taken to release the prisoners. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. We are the organization that represents the interest of Mykolai Karpiuk and his family, and Stanislav Klych and his family, and also in the Court on Human Rights. And also I would like to say about the context, the background, for you to understand what I am talking about. The international standards that exist, that are the principles that were made by the court and the other international organizations as Committee on physical torture. If the person say that he obtained some physical trauma due to torture, then law enforcement bodies should confirm or reject that this was not the reason of their actions. And this is very important because in both cases, Mykola Karpiuk and Stanislav Klych, they complained officially that they were tortured. As to these two persons, there was some medical examination and their results are questionable. Especially, they say that they were tortured by electric current, but the experts didn't establish the correlation between those injuries that they got due to the use of electric shock and the nature, the origin of this trauma. And that's why it's difficult to call this a medical test, and only one part of this document that shows in both cases that on their bodies there are some injuries. But at the start, when both were detained, some medical examination were conducted, and it showed that in both cases that there were no injuries on their bodies, and that's why if we complain, and we will do this, and we will use this argument for the European Court on Human Rights, and we can prove that Mykola, Karpiuk and Stanislav Klych got these injuries in the course of the stay under effective control of law enforcement bodies. And this, so medical examination results are of no importance here, and the chief investigator, there was a submitted claim to the chief investigator, and he rejected the investigation of the case that these persons were tortured, and the arguments that were rejected, and the argument stated by the chief prosecutor, they said that Mykola Karpiuk said that he was involved in these crimes, and he did this in the presence of his lawyer, so his procedural rights were not violated. But this rejection, the statement, should be based on the examination why these injuries were inflicted, and as a result, they should have refuted, the investigation should have refuted that this was not due to the actions or inaction. And also, one of the causes why they rejected to start the case on this is because he signed, Mykola Karpiuk signed everything, and he confessed in the presence of his lawyer, but there was no lawyer there, and if we establish timeline and the time when this took place, when Mykola Karpiuk asked a lawyer, and the time for nomination of this lawyer, and also at the time of signing of this protocol, we see discrepancies there, and physically it was not possible for this lawyer to be there on time. Thank you. Thank you for your attention.
Good afternoon, dear audience. I am a lawyer and I represent interests of Mykola Karpiuk and Mykola Klykh. I would like to state that the proceedings in the Russian Federation in this case are absolutely absurd in terms of criminal legislation, not only because the accusations are fake and they're based on fake evidence and evidence produced under tortures, and it is not proved. The facts in the case are not proved by any facts. The defense mastered to gather the body of evidence which demonstrate that both Mr. Karpiuk and Mr. Klykh have alibis for those periods which are in point. Besides that, thanks to the evidence gathered, we found many circumstances that during the periods which I incriminated, which Stanislav, Klych and Mykola Karpiuk are charged with in crimes. These circumstances demonstrate that during those periods, these two persons were staying in Ukraine. So the proofs should further be gathered to provide efficient defense in the case in Russian Federation, and the responsibility, the liability to gather proofs is the responsibility of the chief investigator of the criminal police of Ukraine, and I now would like to ask him to efficiently gather evidence so that we can defend our Ukrainian citizens. There will be a series of questions after all speakers will give their speeches. Good afternoon, everybody. I am the mother of Stanislav Klych. I will talk in brief. I will speak in brief, and I am crying, and I would like to address all residents of Ukraine and all international community to help my son to return home, because he is unguilty. He is not guilty in anything. And I ask everyone for assistance to my sons and Mr. Karpiuk, who are non-guilty and who are in prison in Russian Federation, so that they can return to their homes. And now we will have series of questions and answers.
1+1. I have a question to Ms. Tomak, that there's some investigation results of the examination. And if they are known, why shouldn't you tell us about it? And the question to Alexander about the alibi, where this data, this information is provided. To whom is this information provided in Russia? We can speak about results of the examination, and they are such that they continue the process, because he is it is established that they can continue with the investigation, and maybe but the defense, they say that they that the lawyers, they demand independent examination, and brainstorming is continued in this area, and we may say that the examination, it established that he is reasonable, so he has a sane mind. And of course, some information should be brought from Ukraine, but whether the Russian side is ready to get this material and use them. And my colleague showed in Facebook a Fagin statement that none of the materials that were brought from Ukraine, Russia didn't include them in the materials of the case. So the question is whether they can be used there. And as Roman told that despite all those risks, we understand that they can include these materials or they won't include this, but we should provide this evidence nonetheless. And the Department of Criminal Investigation of National Police helped us, and they did a lot to gather evidence. And it is very important to state, because people who should do these things, they just ignore this. But there are some volunteers in the system who are ready to help, and we are very thankful to them. And as to the questions to alibi, there are evidence. They were gathered by the side of the defenders, and they were gathered in the framework of 2 criminal investigations that are in the system of our judicial system as to their legal detention, and also in the framework of the international investigation. And these materials were provided in the framework of criminal investigation that is now carried out in Grozny. And in the framework of those actions that were in those proceedings, and also and also assistance from abroad. Some evidence were gathered, and also evidence of people. The Russian Federation, they state that these people committed some crimes in the territory of Russia, but at this time they were in the territory of Ukraine, and there are evidence of this, and also the evidence of people who saw these people in Ukraine at that time. And as to the, do you get some answer? And I don't know at the moment the gathering of evidence. The evidence are gathered by the bodies of Ukrainian police. And I am, as an advocate, as a lawyer, we have limited instruments for gathering such data. And as to the access to the data that is collected by the lawyers, not by the law enforcement bodies. Maybe it's a question it should be addressed to the main investigation department of National Police. And there was a question about the name. His name is Roman Alexandruk. Do you have other questions? Please ask. Introduce yourself first. Ms. Maria, UCMC. Ms. Nadiya, I have a question to you. There are some grounds that there was no lawyer, no advocate in this case. So, is there any discrepancy in the date, or what is the exact data about this? So, when Mykola Karpiuk asked the presence of the lawyer, this was on the 28th of March 2014 in the morning. And after this, the investigators, they reacted at his request, because he said that he could provide additional evidence, and it was in the interest of the investigation. So they started to look for a lawyer for him, and there was some transfer from one region to the next, but they can't find the lawyer for about 2 hours, and it happened so that the lawyer came to him at about in the evening on the 28th of March 2014, and the records are dated, and the signature of this lawyer is stated 9 o'clock in the morning, at 9 a.m. 28th of March 2014, and also evidence provided by Karpiuk, written by hand, where he stated that his interrogation was carried out in absence of his lawyer, and he stated this. And also Dr. Slav, he also provided some documents on this, that this lawyer, he wasn't present in the course of interrogation. And in the statement on starting the criminal proceedings on Tocha, they state that Mykolai also says that it was in her presence, that there were no complaints, and everyone signed everything, and also investigator also provided his evidence in the statement, but Mykola Karpiuk rejects this. But from the other side, there are some questions on the dates, the time of these actions, or Mamakaeva can turn back time and make some manipulations like this. So in Russia, everything is possible, you know. Thank you, Maria. Do you have other questions or comments? If there's no comments or questions, thank you, colleagues, for coming, and till the next time, goodbye.